Because I see today's society, which is thoroughly revolutionary, arguing that everything is equal. There are no boundaries. There are no distinctions. And so we start to see the pattern emerging that actually this philosophy gives way to an anti-natural philosophy, that distinctions are the problem. Distinctions between nations. Nations are bourgeois. Ethnicities, a made-up distinction. Biology, made-up distinction. All distinctions must be collapsed to bring in what Huxley calls the final revolution. All of these revolutions are not to no end or to no purpose. They're what Huxley calls the final revolution. And that is the revolution against man himself. Again, people who were anti-human. People like Dzerzhinsky. Revolutionary philosophers who are negating the negations and negating man himself. But he explicitly points out that it is an illuminist model of radical egalitarianism that's fomenting and bubbling in the Masonic societies that is not purely from the ground up. It is run by the Duke of Orleans. The lesser nobility are running this. And they're getting money from somewhere. I wonder where. Well, it quickly tells us where they're getting money for the revolutions. Do you think that it just came out of nowhere? All these grody, greasy street people, Danton type people, demagogues. You think they didn't have any money? How did they have the revolution? Well, they emptied the jail. That giant, forget the name of it, that giant jail, they emptied out all the people and said, hey, join us in a bloody revolution. And it's all a bunch of criminals. Oh yeah, exactly. That's what they're going to do. That's what they're doing now. The same revolutionary model. It's elites behind this, just like the Duke of Orleans, who ran Orient Freemasonry, who got money from very wealthy families. Let's open up the jails. There's our revolutionary force. A giant criminal thug class. And that's literally who then beheaded all the elites in France. If Freemasonry provided the general milieu and symbolic vocabulary for a revolution organization, it was the Illuminists that provided the basic structural model. The organizational plan of Buonarroti distilled 2 decades of revolutionary experience in Geneva and thus into a simple Bavarian order of Illuminists. The radical secular occult movement, notice that's not a contradiction, radical secular occult movement, was organized on 3 levels of a secret hierarchy: church, synod, and Areopagite. Buonarroti's revolutionary version of this structure defined the new church. It's an atheistic cell church of local cells headed by what they called a sage, who was alone linked with a regional synod. So basically an altar church. It's a secret church. The members of each synod were the sublime elect, headed by a territorial deacon, who supervised the activities of all the, quote, churches in the region. The highest Areopagite grade was called the Great Firmament, or the heavens, sent out its own subtle deacons to control the synods and supervise propaganda and agitprop, arising from Illuminist figures like Buonarroti. Now, this is another thing to understand, that when you are debating with a Marxist, again, you are not actually debating with a person who is interested in coming to truth. Now, there might be an individual Marxist who doesn't know this kind of stuff, who maybe at an individual level, he genuinely wants to learn or know some truth. But Marxists in general do not operate from the vantage point of wanting to come to and discover truth. In fact, Saul Alinsky, I believe, says that embracing contradictions is the necessary process of an agent, right? Of an activist. An activist truly engaging in praxis, Alinsky says, accepts and embraces contradictions. So again, you will never get consistency and coherency in a system which embraces and rejects logic. Or embraces logic and then rejects it by accepting contradictions. And again, agitprop is another one of their key techniques, because agitprop is sort of street theater, agitation, and it's a form of propaganda. So for many Marxists, debating is not arriving at truth or proving your position. Debating is intentional conflict, causing emotions, causing drama, everything that you saw the last 3 days on Twitter with these lunatics and unstable people. They're engaging in agitprop.
Pretty little baby, pretty little.
Because that's what their philosophy tells them to do. And for the early Bolsheviks, for example, for agitprop, the term originates in the Soviet Union, but Marxists were doing this for a long time. They would use popular media, plays, literature, pamphlets, and other forms of art to just simply push their message. Had nothing to do with what was true or false, right? So it was all just propaganda. And it even used street theater. Agitprop theater arose as a politicized theater in the 1920s of Europe to spread to the United States. The plays of Bertolt Brecht are notable examples. By the way, I've read Bertolt Brecht's plays. I had a whole class on German playwrights, and I read one or two of Bertolt Brecht. And so he was a Marxist, I guess, who was a believer in engaging in this kind of agitprop, right? So you can see that the street theater has nothing to do. Obviously, street theater has nothing to do with truth, right? It's just about being a provocateur. So it does overlap with provocateurs. Not every agitprop is run by an agent provocateur, but every agent provocateur most likely engages in agitprop. Agitation, propaganda. Agitate to just call attention. Nothing to do with what's true. And by the way, this is not exclusive to Marxists. Basically, all of mainstream mass media is agitprop. Okay, so this is not just Marxists, but Marxists are committed to this as actually part of their praxis. Okay, but you can begin to see how, because they embrace contradictions, they embrace dissociation. They embrace double mind and double think. This is what Orwell talks about. Orwell talks about that this embracing of contradictions, which Winston tries to force, and eventually does force Winston to do, causes a split, a break in Winston's mind. And you remember when that lunatic guy came on the stream, he said, I'm here to destroy your mind. I'm here to psychologically destroy you. Because that's how the Marxist sees his necessary action of negating the existing reality to further the dialectic. So they have a mystical religious commitment to process philosophy and destruction as a form of creative chaos. Creative destruction is a Marxist idea. This, by the way, is why ultimately this whole nonsense satanic system is called by Father Seraphim Rose revolutionary nihilism. And he's absolutely right.